much, everybody. Welcome for coming. My name is Gianna Morgan, and I am the director of the Declaration for American Democracy. Yes. We are a coalition of more than 230 organizations representing tens of millions of Americans nationwide, working together to realize the promise of our democracy by passing legislation that will transform our political system into one that works for us. And we have big news today on that front. Just this morning, Senate Democrats announced that they have come to an agreement on the Freedom to Vote Act. This bold legislation will protect the freedom to vote, end partisan gerrymandering, and reduce the power of big money special interests in our politics, upholding the key pillars of the For the People Act. And so this is the revised kind of version of the For the People Act, and so you've now made my shirt a collector's item. Thank you, everybody. Grab your signs. They're going to be hard to get after this. So now we're here today to rally with activists, civil rights leaders, members of Congress, and more to say that we are ready to do whatever it takes to finish the job and get the Freedom to Vote Act signed into law. Our nation needs a transformative reform package that will protect our freedom to vote, guarantee congressional districts are drawn to give fair representation to all, and prevent billionaires from buying elections. We are joined today by civil rights leaders and activists like Martin Luther King III and Arndrea Waters King, as well as some of our congressional champions, including Senators Klobuchar, Merkley, Van Hollen, Padilla, and Representative Sarbanes. We are also looking forward to hearing from our powerful voting rights advocates, including Randy Weingarten of the American Federation for Teachers, Representative Trey Martinez Fisher of Texas, and Susan Almeida of Common Cause, Pennsylvania. And I'm so excited to be joined by my co-moderator, Cliff Albright, co-founder and executive director of Black Voters Matter. We are here today because American democracy is in crisis. 18 states have enacted 30 laws that will make it harder for Americans, especially black and brown folks, to vote. Boo, that's right. Yeah. And without passing bold national voting rights protections immediately, these dangerous state laws could threaten the safety and the integrity of the 2022 midterm elections. On top of that, last month's release of 2020 census data started the clock for states to begin redrawing their maps for their congressional districts. And without legislative protections in place, millions of Americans are facing another 10 years where politicians pick their voters rather than the other way around because of partisan gerrymandering. Our country is at risk of disenfranchising millions of Americans. We cannot wait any longer. Thankfully, Majority Leader Schumer and the Senate Democrats are united and committed to taking up and passing voting rights legislation as their first priority now that recess has concluded. If Senate Republicans continue to obstruct and block legislation, our leaders need to outline a clear vision to overcome the Jim Crow filibuster so that we can finally pass this popular legislation and get us closer to transforming our democracy into one that is of, by, and for the people. And we want to see President Biden step up too. The Biden administration has promised to protect our freedom to vote, but we have yet to see them use the full power of the Oval Office. President Biden, we need you to use every lever of power at your disposal to help the Senate overcome the filibuster and pass this critical bill. The electorate that showed up for you in 2020 now needs you to show up for all Americans to protect the sacred right to vote. And to fully realize the promise of our democracy, to ensure the freedom to vote, and create a government that works for all people, we also need to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act and D.C. statehood to finally enfranchise the people of Washington, D.C. And we are here to tell our leaders it's time for you to keep your promise so that we can safely and freely cast our ballots, have our voices heard, and ensure that our representatives reflect and respond to us. Our message today is loud and clear. It's time to finish the job for the people. And so it is now my honor to introduce our first speaker, Senator Amy Klobuchar. Senator Klobuchar is a steadfast champion of democracy, representing the great state of Minnesota. She is the chairwoman of the Senate Committee on Rules and Administration, where she led the For the People Act through the committee process and onto the Senate floor. And she is now the co-lead sponsor of the Freedom to Vote Act. Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your kind introduction, Jonah. And thank you to Cliff for co-hosting this event with the Declaration for American Democracy. And we are here to declare that democracy is alive and well, and we will keep it strong with the Freedom to Vote Act. We have had so many great people working on this. You're going to hear from Senator Merkley and Senator Sarbanes, as many as others, but I had to acknowledge my great friend who's here with me today, Senator Padilla, who, as you know, has been working hard to stop a very anti-democracy move, which is the recall in California, which I predict we will win tonight. So, it has been over 8 months since the violent mob of insurrectionists, imagine it right now, right over there, right at that Capitol, stormed through this very spot and desecrated our Capitol, the temple of our democracy. It was not just an attack on the building, it was an attack on the Republic itself. And as I said weeks later on the inaugural stage, under that beautiful blue sky, at the very place where they had invaded, there was still spray paint on the columns. We were standing in front of makeshift windows. And as I said, this is a moment when our democracy picks itself up, brushes off the dust, and moves forward as America always does, going forward as a nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We took back our democracy that day. And with this bill, with the support, by the way, of 78% of Americans, not just Democrats, independents and Republicans, 78% of Americans who favor early voting, 83% of all voters who support public disclosures of contributions. We will take our democracy back again from those who are trying to take away people's constitutional rights to vote. With over 400 bills introduced in nearly every state to limit the freedom to vote, we can't simply sit back and watch and let our democracy fall. Whether it is threatened with bear spray and crowbars and axes, or long lines, no ballot boxes, and dark money, it is still under siege. When we are faced with a coordinated effort across the country to limit the freedom to vote, we must stand up and do what is right. As my colleague, Senator Reverend Raphael Warnock has said, some people don't want some people to vote. And that is why we introduced today, thanks to Senator Schumer's leadership, who brought us together through, well, let's not call it a recess. That was not what we had in August. I cannot tell you how many calls we did. Senator Padilla would tell you how many Zoom gatherings to work out the details of this legislation. But we are united behind basic national standards that make sure that all Americans can vote in the way they want, regardless of their zip code. The bill includes so many of the popular reforms in the For the People Act, which you know our friend Senator Merkley and Representative Sarbanes have valiantly led. Guaranteed all Americans have access to at least 15 days of early voting, ensuring all voters can cast a mail-in ballot, making it easier to register to vote, including same-day registration, preventing eligible voters from being purged from the voter rolls, and prohibiting gerrymandering so that voters choose their elected officials and not the other way around. We know these bills are spreading. We know what just happened in Texas. And as we speak, many states are fast underway in drawing new congressional maps. Without this bill, there will be nothing to limit many states from drawing gerrymandering maps that will distort the votes of Americans for the next decade. Those are the stakes, my friend. You know, when we had our and thanks to Senator Padilla and Senator Merkley, and Senator Ossoff and so many others for their long service that day on the Rules Committee. We heard a lot of stuff from our Republican colleagues. One of the things they kept saying is somehow setting these basic national standards would create chaos. Really? Chaos is purging the names of longtime voters from the voter rolls so they show up and then find out they can't vote. That is chaos. Chaos is forcing people in Wisconsin at the beginning of the pandemic when no one knew what to do, standing out in line in garbage bags and homemade masks. That is chaos. Chaos is the angry mob on January 6th. That was chaos. And you want to stop the chaos? Well, this is what I say to Mitch McConnell. You stop the chaos with basic minimum federal voting standards. That is how you stop the chaos. You stop the chaos by telling extremists they can't spend millions of dollars on sham audits of public money. That's how you stop the chaos. You stop the chaos by getting dark money out of our politics and make sure everyone has a voice by ending the partisan gerrymandering. You stop the voice by telling that guy in governor that he can't, governor in Georgia, that he can't take away. That is the most elegant end to a speech I've ever heard. Little note, time to end. You stop the chaos by telling the governor in Georgia that he can't take away water and food from people who are standing in line in the hot sun for hours and hours and hours. We will get this done, and we are united today to move forward on the substance of this bill, and that is a major victory. Do not take away from that victory. But that is how these marches are long. We were just talking about John Lewis. He never came up. We've got Martin Luther King III here. His family never gave up, and we will never give up until we pass this bill. Thank you, everyone.
All right, y'all give it up for the Senate again, please. Give it up. We fired up. When I say love, you say power. Love. Love. When I say freedom, you say to vote. Freedom. Freedom. I'm so excited to be here today. I'm Cliff Albright, co-founder, executive director of Black Voters Matter. I'm so excited to be here today with all these great speakers, with all of you, and in particular with the next speaker that I'm about to bring up. And as I'm about to bring him up, I'm reminded of something that his father once talked about. Dr. Martin Luther King once did a sermon talking about the drum major instinct. He once did a sermon, he was talking about, you got a lot of people that want to be in front, right? They want to be in front of something. They want to be first on something. And he wanted to be remembered for being a drum major for love, and a drum major for righteousness, and a drum major for justice. And that's why I'm so excited to be here today, because we got so many of these speakers who have been drum majors for voting rights, who have been drum majors for the freedom to vote, who have been drum majors in the Senate, who have been drum majors in the House, who have been drum majors in the Texas State Legislature, who have been drum majors on the street. We need some more drum majors for justice. And I'm glad we got all of them, but the most important drum majors for justice, the most important drum majors for the freedom to vote are all of you out there that are standing out there who have been in the streets. All of you who are watching right now on the internet or wherever it is that you're watching, we need all of you to continue to be drum majors for the freedom to vote, because I believe more than ever that as long as we got enough drum majors, right? Enough drum majors that don't just want to be in the front just to be in the front, but be in the front because they are fighting for righteousness and justice and voting rights and freedom. As long as we have that, we will get where we need to get to. And an important voice in all that, and somebody who I first met 21 years ago, I don't even think he remembers, we met in Selma. In the year 2000 during the Selma's mayor's race. And he was fighting for justice then, and he's been fighting for justice ever since. As the oldest son of the late Dr. Martin Luther King and Miss Coretta Scott King, Martin Luther King III is a thought leader on the world stage. He's a peacemaker, a negotiator on some of today's most critical national and international issues, including the freedom to vote. He's been amplifying his father's work. Mr. King has devoted his life to promoting global human rights and eradicating racism, poverty, and fighting for justice. It is my pleasure to introduce you Martin Luther King III.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
I must start by saying that we never ever will not fight for that which is right. But I am one that is truly disappointed in where we find ourselves in our nation right now.
That's right. You're not the only. You're right.
In 1968, my father was killed in Memphis, Tennessee, with sanitation workers working to make sure that they were treated like human beings with decent wages. Of course, today we're joining senators and some congresspersons and members of the labor movement, leadership like Randy Weingarten and others. And I might add, yesterday we were here to deliver a letter to Mitch McConnell, the minority leader. And I'm sad to say that when you talk about bipartisanship, you need to be talking to people. We were requesting a meeting, and in the United States Capitol, after we met with Leader Schumer, and his office refused to even allow us to drop a letter off. Now, how do you call that a democracy? Insulting. And then, ultimately, the letter was just asking to engage in dialogue. We may come to the conclusion that we have to disagree without being disagreeable, which is what my father taught us. But the biggest reason that I'm sad is that we should be expanding voting rights. We travel all over the world talking about democracy, and yet right at home we are suppressing it. You know the statistics. I don't need to give you the numbers. But we certainly know that 18 states at least now have passed legislation, 30 pieces of legislation, and over 400 have been presented. That is not what is a democracy that includes all. That is about reducing the opportunity for people to vote. We are not going to stand for it. As I said, we're going to continue to fight until that fighting is done in a nonviolent way. I want to make sure you understand that, because there are many people who are fighting on many fronts, some not nonviolent. We'll see some folks coming in here in a few days on the weekend. They've demonstrated that they don't have a nonviolent mission. They have an opposite mission. It's not about condemning or criticizing, but it is challenging them to do better. All right for you to demonstrate, but to demonstrate with destructiveness is unacceptable. And so as I prepare to close, and as a representative of the Drum Major Institute, my wife and I, my wife being the president, I'm the chairman of the board. A couple weeks ago, we convened demonstrations across this nation in 41 states, over 300 organizations along with us, over 100 marches, and online we engaged 1/3 of the United States population, over 100 million people. Americans are interested in this issue. Americans want to be able to vote unencumbered, to expand that right. That's what we're talking about. So I always say, don't give up, don't give out, don't give in. My father, my mother, and even now my daughter, our daughter, at 13 years old, is working as an activist to change our nation, to make it the nation that it ought to be. Not the nation that claims that it was great at some point. We've had moments of greatness, but I don't know what great again means. I personally don't understand. I'm not sure what time you're talking about. And I could go through a litany of times where you're talking about this time or that time. But Martin Luther King Jr. talking about making America the nation that it ought to become. And when we become that nation, voting rights will not be encumbered at all. Any and everyone who is a citizen will have the right to vote anytime. We should make it as easy as possible. That's what democracy is about. And let me thank the conveners who convened us today. For convening us today. And while You know, I learned that it only takes a few good women and men to bring about change. My dad and my mom taught us that. And we are determined, we are dedicated, we are dependable. We're going to be coming back again and again until this legislation is passed for the American people. Thank you, and may God bless each of you always.
Y'all give it up again for Martin Luther King III. We're going to travel now. We're going to go across the country. We're going to go from Atlanta to the great state of California, where we're so excited to be joined by one of the senators from the great state of California. Senator Padilla has served as chairman of the Judiciary Committee on Immigration. He's on the Budget and Governmental Affairs and Homeland Security Committees. And he is also, perhaps most importantly for today, he is one of the lead negotiators on the new Freedom to Vote Act. Ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for Senator Padilla.
Before I take my mask off to speak, just want to make sure you all get a real good look at this. Because we've got two important agendas in our country right now. Right? If you've been vaccinated, thank you. Spread the word to any friends, family that still haven't. We need people to get vaccinated to get past this pandemic. But we're gathered here today, and I want to thank Common Cause and the entire coalition for your ongoing advocacy to support our fundamental right to vote. I know why we're here. You know why we're here. It is offensive that more than 55 years after the passage of the Federal Voting Rights Act, we have to relitigate our right to vote and access to the ballot. 8 years after the Shelby v. Holder decision, we are here having to defend our right to vote and preserve access to the ballot. But we have to, and we will. You know, let me remind us of how this year started, this calendar year started. Senator Klobuchar, great chair of the Rules Committee, reminded us of the daily insurrection that took place right here, all premised on the big lie. The big lie that has served for the other side as a pretext to suppress the right to vote and access to the ballot. We started this year with the reintroduction of the For the People Act, which our Republican colleagues said a couple things about. Number one, wait, we just had a very successful 2020 election. Why do we need to change the rules in how elections are administered throughout the state, throughout the country? But we also saw the introduction in state houses across the country, bills, now laws, that makes it harder for eligible people to cast their ballot. And then when we reminded our Republican colleagues of that, they said, well, just because bills are introduced doesn't mean they'll actually become law. Well, here we are, months later, and we know that far too many of them have been passed and signed into law. We gotta call out this hypocrisy. For Republican members to come to the Capitol and say, if we're going to make changes to elections, it needs to be done on a bipartisan basis. Yet they refuse to call out the partisan attacks on a right to vote in state after state after state. Enough is enough. So as I mentioned, we started off this year with two bills, the For the People Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. Not one or the other, we need both. And so what are Republican members saying now? Well, the For the People Act is too broad. Okay, let's negotiate, let's talk. Senator Klobuchar, myself, Senator Warnock, Senator Manchin, Senator King, Senator Schumer, and others crafted what we introduced today, the Freedom to Vote Act. Tailored, focused, voting rights access to the ballot that we need to pass now. We need to pass this now. Our right to vote is under attack now. The midterm elections will be upon us before we know it. We need to get this measure passed now. Now, to really simplify it, let me just take us all back to high school government class. At least as far as I was taught, our democracy works best when as many eligible people participate. What a concept. And so if we have the ideas, if we have the policies that make it easier for eligible people to register to vote, to stay registered to vote, and to actually cast their ballot, then we have a moral and a legal obligation to advance those proposals. And that's exactly what we're doing with the Freedom to Vote Act. Online voter registration, automatic voter registration, same-day voter registration, no excuse vote by mail, in-person early voting. These aren't just ideas that we think are good and we want to cross our fingers, hope they work. We know they work. We've implemented them in California, the most populous state in the nation, the most diverse state in the nation, that now boasts the largest, most diverse electorate of any state in the nation. We have created, wow, I inspire some church bells here. We have created in California the most inclusive democracy of any state in the nation, and every voter in America deserves the same options to participate, to register to vote, to stay registered to vote, and actually cast their ballot. Our democracy is on the line, and with your advocacy, with our partnership, we're going to get it done. Thank you very much.
Let's hear it for Senator Padilla. Okay. And it's now my pleasure to introduce Senator Jeff Merkley, an avid champion of democracy reform and the lead sponsor of the For the People Act. He has dedicated himself to fighting for opportunity for the people of Oregon. He is a member of the Appropriations Committee, the Environment and Public Works Committee, the Budget Committee, and the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He is the lead sponsor of the For the People Act and a lead negotiator for the revised version, the Freedom to Vote Act. Senator Merkley.
Are y'all energized and ready to be mobilized? Fair elections. Fair elections are the foundation of our republic. Are you ready to fight for fair elections? Yeah! What do we want? Fair elections. When do we want it? Now! What do we want? Fair elections. When do we want it? Now! Now, absolutely, because we're going right on in to the 2022 cycle, and the census numbers have been released. Redistricting is starting to occur. So how about we get the bill passed within the next 6 weeks before the end of October? And how about we make sure the bill is written so any state which has gerrymandered itself during that time period has to redo its districting to the national standards. Now, as we work to have a bill that all 50 Democrats can support, we have a new bill, the Freedom to Vote. I think it's a great title because it really goes to the heart of what a republic is all about. And this comes from the work of 8 senators who came together, who worked over many difficult issues where Secretary of States had different ideas and clerks had different ideas. But here's what I'm so pleased about. This bill will still stop billionaires from buying elections, and that's important. This bill will still stop gerrymandering, and that's essential. And perhaps most important of all, this bill will absolutely defend the ballot box and the freedom to vote for every single American. The ballot box kind of just is the pulsating heart of a republic, the pulsating heart of our democracy. And I'm astounded that we are at a moment now when we're going back pre-1965, when targeted groups were basically designed to prevent them from voting with different laws in different states. And now we have that again. What is wrong with our Republican senators? They won't defend the freedom to vote for every single American. What is wrong with them? They're still trying to go back to a racist past that keeps black Americans from voting, Hispanic voters from voting, Native Americans from voting, even college students from voting. What is wrong? Shouldn't this be a 100% bipartisan bill that 100 senators who have pledged themselves to the Constitution will support? Well, maybe they should listen to Republican base across the country, which actually, if you poll them, they want to stop billionaires from buying elections. They want to stop gerrymandering and support equal representation because they have the DNA of our Constitution and our vision of equal participation in their hearts. That is the Republican base. Well, you may say, really? But yes, check the polling numbers. But the Republican senators, they're all about the manipulation of elections to create government by the powerful rather than government by the people. So let's get this bill passed to save government by the people of the United States of America. Let's go out and make it happen. Let's make it happen before the end of October. God bless you all. Thank you.
Let's hear it for Senator Merkley. And now I have the honor of introducing Arndrea Waters King. She has dedicated herself to serving humanity as a passionate leader in the global fight against inequity, injustice, hate crimes, and all forms of pain. Arndrea has championed several nonviolence and social change initiatives, designing programs to advance understanding and activism. Please welcome Arndrea Waters King.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Well, I hope that you all are fired up today. All right. You know, today the right to vote, which so many fought for 58 years ago, is under attack once again. And an effort is underway to purposely silence the voices of Black and brown Americans. A few weeks ago, Texas became the latest state to pass legislation that will make it harder, not easier, to access the ballot box. I know. Despite the valiant effort of some members of the legislature, the state is on track to join and lead other southern states to enact laws reminiscent of those in place during the Jim Crow era. And these laws have a direct result of the mobilization of thousands of Americans who came together to march and vote in 2020. Our work made a difference, but it is not done yet. This year, on the 50th anniversary of my father-in-law, Martin Luther King Jr.'s March on Washington, tens of thousands of people in cities from Washington, D.C. to Arizona took to the streets to say with one voice that we will not be silenced. We will not be intimidated, and we will not sit idly by while our most basic right as Americans is being stripped away. Not on our watch. In November last year, we rejoiced when we felt as though we won the battle for the soul of the nation. The election of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris felt like turning the page to a new chapter. A few months later, we celebrated once more when Reverend Raphael Warnock and John Ossoll were elected to the Senate, making history and securing the Democratic majority needed to pass progressive policies. And yet, the current attack on voting rights reminds us that democracy is not a bank you make a deposit into once every 4 years. Yet you keep taking withdrawals from every day. As John Lewis said in his final message to us, democracy is not a state, it is an act. Our democracy is under attack, and it's up to us to remind the officials we so enthusiastically elected less than a year ago just why we put them into office. The Senate and the administration are saying that they don't have the power. They're saying obstacles like the filibuster are insurmountable. But on August 28, 2021, there were over 95 marches and activations nationwide, in all in 41 states across this nation. uniting tens of thousands of people in the fight against voter suppression. We are telling those in office, this is what the people want. This is what the people need, and this is why the people elected you. It's time to act now, not a month or a year away. The time to act is now. It's time to move from commemoration and turn to legislation. The U.S. Senate must recognize the gravity of the situation, and we've heard some movement on it today, right before us. In the 58 years since the March on Washington, we have not seen such a threat to our democracy as we do today. The filibuster, a relic of white supremacy itself, is not untouchable. We cannot surrender the right to vote to a procedural roadblock. Congress must do everything to pass the Freedom to Vote Act. Anything short of that will be a disservice to the men and women who gave their lives for their cause decades ago. You know, January 6th, we saw the worst of this nation. On August 28th, we saw the best of this nation. And I was reminded of the passage from the Old Testament. Come, let's slay, here comes that dreamer. Come, let's slay him, and then we shall see what will become of his dream. We have to keep pushing forward. We have to keep marching. We have to keep mobilizing. We have to keep organizing. And then we shall see what will become of the dream. Thank you very much.
Please give it up again for Arndrea Waters King. Next, you know, we're here talking about the freedom to vote. Everybody say freedom to vote. Freedom to vote. But before the freedom to vote, we need to be very clear that Representative John Sarbanes was one of the lead architects, one of the lead authors of the For the People Act, and has played a major role in getting us to the point where we're at today. Representative Sarbanes has been in the fight since the beginning. He represents Maryland's 3rd Congressional District for 14 years. That means he must be doing something right, Congressman. And he's been representing for 14 years in the U.S. House. Y'all, please give it up for Representative John Sarbanes.
Thank you very much, Cliff. I guess what I've been doing right is fighting for democracy all these years. I want to thank Cliff, the other organizers of this, the Declaration for American Democracy. If you wonder whether black voters matter, that's why we're here right now. That's why today in the Senate, the Freedom to Vote Act was introduced, a consensus product of 50 Democratic senators that can meet all the threats that are coming at us in this moment. What a process, what a journey this has been. I don't have a lot to say. I'm just glad to be with you here. And by here, I don't mean here physically so much, although that's nice, but to be here in this moment of great opportunity for our democracy.
Thank you, Congressman.
We can get this done. We can absolutely get this done. I'm glad to be here. I got the short straw a little bit, having to speak after Arndrea Waters King and Martin Luther King III. I want to thank them and the other leaders of what has become a movement, a new movement across this country to redeem the voice and the vote of every American, regardless of their political stripe, regardless of the state they live in. To lift up all Americans. That has always been the starting and ending point of this effort. And you've been right in the middle of that. I want to congratulate the senators, as I've said, who've worked for weeks, if not months now, to come up with a product that can keep this effort to fortify our democracy moving forward. We have to put everything we have behind it. We know what happens. We know that the people that are undermining our democracy, they try to diminish the voice of the people out in the country with voter suppression, election subversion, partisan gerrymandering, and then the big money and the special interests diminish the voice of the people here in Washington. So we have to lift up the voice of the people, empower them. Do you know what power looks like? Right here. It's right here, but it means that on the day you decide to vote, when you get up in the morning, on the day you've decided to vote, that you have confidence you can do that without having to run an obstacle course. Whether it's going to vote early, or whether it's showing up on election day, or whether your march to the polls is to get up at 80 years old in your nursing home, march to the lounge, sit at a table, take out your mail-in ballot, pick up the engine of democracy in your hand, which is your pen, and you do this. How much power is there in that motion to fill out that oval to say, I have a voice and I have a vote? That's power. That's the power that we're trying to bring. So let me close with this. I don't need to tell you anything. None of us need to tell you anything about what to do. We're here because of what you've done. You have to keep telling us. Keep making the demand. Keep the pressure high. Make sure that no lawmaker can escape the day of reckoning, which is to get this bill over the finish line. Keep marching. Thank you for what you're doing.
Y'all give it up for Representative Sarbanes. Show me what democracy looks like.
This is what democracy looks like.
Show me what democracy looks like.
This is what democracy looks like.
Show me what democracy looks like.
This is what democracy looks like.
All right, y'all give it up for yourselves. Give it up for yourselves. You know, we just had Representative Sarbanes from the great state of Maryland, but you know, I'd be remiss if I didn't point out, and you may see our friends over here with the signs, that right now we are standing in what should be the great state of the District of Columbia, or the great state of the Douglas Commonwealth, whatever we call it. This needs to be a state. And so while we've been talking a lot about H.R. 1 and H.R. 4, you know, we don't want to forget about H.R. 51, right? Because the denial of the vote to folks here in D.C. is perhaps one of the oldest forms of voter suppression. So y'all give it up for D.C. real quick. That's right, that's right. And so from D.C. right back to Maryland, to the great state of Maryland, we're about to introduce Senator Chris Van Hollen, who was first elected to the U.S. Senate by the people of Maryland in November 2016. He is committed to fighting every day to ensure that our country lives up to its full promise of equal rights, equal justice, and equal opportunity, including the fight for the freedom to vote. Y'all please give it up for Senator Chris Van Hollen.
Thank you for being here to defend our democracy. Amen to statehood for the people of the District of Columbia. We are not a complete democracy until everybody who lives in our nation's capital can cast a vote for their representatives and voting representatives in the House and the Senate.
Thank you, Senator.
And we are here to defend democracy against the poison of the big lie that we see coursing throughout the country. The big lie that came right here to the United States Capitol in a violent attack and assault on January 6th. And the big lie, which is taking shape in legislatures across the country, whether it's Texas or Georgia or others where Republicans are in control. And we are here to say, we have to save our democracy. That is what's at stake right here and right now. That's why the Texas Democratic legislators came here to this exactly spot and to the United States Capitol saying, we have done everything we can in Texas to stop the efforts to erect barriers to voting, barriers intended to specifically block communities of color and younger voters from the voting booth. So these are people who do not believe in democracy, not winning by persuading voters of the strength of their cause, These are people who are trying to cheat in democracy by erecting barriers to voting. And we have to say no to that. So what do? We have to pass the Freedom to Vote Act. We're now going to get every single Democratic senator on board for the Freedom to Vote Act, and we have to pass the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act. Now, how are we going to do that? This is no secret to all of you. We have to eliminate the filibuster. The filibuster is an anti-democratic small d provision. The filibuster is nowhere to be found in the United States Constitution. The filibuster is an invention of the United States Senate. Now, the United States Senate decided that they didn't want a filibuster to prevent us from moving forward on important issues related to the budget. That's what that reconciliation process is all about, right? You can pass budget-related measures with 51 votes without a filibuster. So in what universe does it make sense to create exceptions to the filibuster for budget-related things, but not get rid of the filibuster to protect our democracy? That makes no sense at all. All it does is take a Senate which is already tilted in an anti-democratic way because the senators from Wyoming, with a very small population, in fact lower than the District of Columbia, have the same voting power as the senators from California or Maryland. So all the filibuster does is layer on top of that an anti-democratic, anti-majoritarian layer. And we need to protect our democracy, and to do that, we're going to have to get rid of this anti-democratic provision. So thank you for being here. Thank you for defending our democracy. We've got to get this done because the future of our country and of our democratic form of government is at stake. Take care. Thank you for being here.
Let's hear it for Senator Van Hollen. Great. And now I am so excited to introduce Randy Weingarten, the president of the American Federation of Teachers. They are a union of 1.7 million teachers, paraprofessionals, and school-related personnel, higher education faculty and staff, nurses, and other educational professionals from the local, state, and federal government employees, as well as early childhood educators. The AFT is dedicated to the belief that every person in America deserves the freedom to thrive, fueled by opportunity, justice, and a voice in our democracy. We are so proud that the AFT is a member of the Declaration for American Democracy. Please welcome Randy Weingarten.
So, you know, before this morning, to take my mask off or to not, before this morning, before the last few days, it's been a very hot August. And for those of us in schools, it's been filled with trepidation. Are we going to get back to school? Are we going to be there safely? All of that. Why do I start there? Because what does public education have to do with voting? Everything. What does Medicare have to do with voting? Everything. What does Social Security have to do with voting?
Everything.
What does civil rights have to do with voting?
Everything.
What does every bit of social legislation and freedom in the United States have to do with voting?
Everything.
So, here I am, an 11th grade social studies teacher, now being the president of the AFT, and I teach democracy every day. What you're doing is you are living democracy. You are fighting for democracy. You are making sure it's not just a little sport that we watch. You are making sure that our children and our grandchildren actually have, as Martin Luther King said, the country that we should have. Not the country that we do have, but the country that we should have. And the signs today say finish the job. I know in many of these different rallies that many of us have been to, like the ones on the steps of the Supreme Court. Like the day that that Arizona case came out. Like the day that the Texas legislature passed those voter suppression issues. The day the Georgia legislature passed the voter suppression issues. I know there have been many days when we, the activists, have said, what's happening? Why is this happening? Why is this in 2021 having a fight that we thought we won in 1965? And I know it goes through many of us. Why do we have to get up one more day and fight? Because one day longer is one day stronger. Because we know that when we have a voice in our government, then people win. When we have a voice in our government, then it is we the people who govern, not the politicians who decide who the electorate is, but it's we the people who decide the electorate. These may be concepts that we teach our kids, but you, the activists, are living these concepts. And because of all the work that you have done for the People Act, for the John Lewis Act, for the days and weeks that you have been advocating and activating and organizing, that is why today there is an agreement in the Democrats in the Senate for the Freedom to Vote Act. That is your victory. That is your activism. And what that bill does is it solves the problems of the big lie. What that bill does is it wrests back control to the people of voting to create fair elections again. That bill and the John R. Lewis bill give us what we believed we were trying to do with the Voting Rights Act in 1965. So today, when we say finish the job, you know as well as I do, the work is not done. But it is a moment to have this inflection point because of your work, because of your activation, because you never gave up. You don't give up on the democracy. You don't give up on people. You don't give up on our country. And God bless you for that. But this is where I'll end. That's why it's important that all of us and all the groups that are here, why the labor movement is here, why the senators are here, why Martin Luther King's son is here. The job from here on in is just as hard as what we've gone through. Because those who want the big lie do not want us to vote. Those who push the big lie want this voter suppression. They want a country that looks very different than what the country looks like right now. And they will throw every obstacle up. And they will disinform and misinform and do every amount of bullying that they can think of. The question I have for you is, will we get in good trouble? Yeah. Will we fight for the freedom to vote? Yeah. Will we fight for the John Lewis Act? Yeah. Will we be deterred? No. See, this is a good audience. Will we fight every day until every American has the right to vote? Yeah. And when we do, and when we win, we will gather together and say, this generation reclaimed the multi-cultural and multi-racial democracy that became America in 1965. Thank you.
speakers that we want to have y'all hear from. But first, I want to show you our scorecards. It's back to school season. And so in that vein, we wanted to give report cards to the Senate, to the House, and to President Biden. So our first report card is for the House of Representatives. Want to hold it up? So when it comes to passage of the For the People Act, which has now become a version or iterated into the Freedom to Vote Act, the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, and DC statehood, we got an A+. They did a great job of getting these bills passed and getting them to the Senate. Now that doesn't mean their work is done on democracy issues and in all the incredible and important issues that we have facing us in America. But on these three provisions, we are giving the House an A+, and we thank our leaders there, especially Speaker Pelosi and Representative Sarbanes, who helped to usher the For the People Act through the House. So let's give it up.
Now, on the other hand, we've got the Senate. And you know how it goes with report cards. Anytime you got some red on your report card, that's not a good thing, right? And so we know that the Senate has not done what the House has done, and mainly because of that filibuster that we already talked about. You heard Senator Van Hollen talk about it. You heard everybody talk about it. That filibuster has got to go. Say real on time, real quick. Hey, hey, ho, ho. The filibuster has got to go. Ho, ho. The filibuster has got to go.
Hey ho, the filibuster has got to go.
And until it does, they're not going to get a passing grade. They'll be failing this class until they get rid of that filibuster and pass the Freedom to Vote Act.
That's right. We know our champion's been working hard to pass these bills in the Senate, and we've got blocked by the GOP filibuster, and this needs to end. We need to overcome that filibuster and get these bills passed. Last up, we have President Biden. Now, we've got some question marks here. Okay, we got some question marks. We've heard some statements, some incredibly powerful statements from President Biden about the importance of passing these critical bills: the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, the For the People Act, which has now become the has now iterated into the Freedom to Vote Act. But we need more than words. We need action. We need action. We need the full power of the Oval Office to pass these critical reform bills and restore and rebuild American democracy. We're talking about building back better. Let's build back better our democracy. Our democracy has never worked for all Americans. It has not worked for people of color. It has not worked for queer people. It has not worked for disabled people. It has not worked for women. There are so many people that have had to fight tooth and nail every day for their rights, for their right to vote especially. And we should not still be here in 2021 having these same discussions. So President Biden, we are asking you, please, use every lever of power you have to help us get these bills passed. Right now it's at an incomplete because we believe that you can, we believe that you will. So please don't let us down. Please do what we need you to do and use every bit of power you can, and let's pass the Freedom to Vote, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, and DC statehood. Thanks so much to our incredible report card holders. We'll put these at the front so folks can take photos. I'm going to turn it over to Cliff now to introduce our next speaker.
All right, y'all. Some of y'all may have heard about these state legislators from the great state of Texas who fought the good fight, who broke quorum not just once but twice, who did everything they could to delay the voter suppression bill in the state of Texas and would have achieved the desired end if the Senate had acted faster on the For the People Act, on the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. So I'm so pleased. I've met this representative a few weeks ago during that quorum break. I'm so pleased to introduce Texas Representative Trey Martinez Fisher, who currently is serving in his 10th term in the Texas House of Representatives. He was, of course, one of the leaders of the 38-day quorum to break the voter suppression bill in the state of Texas. As part of that effort, he and his Democratic colleagues spent a month right here in D.C. advocating, not just hanging out, not just fleeing from the state of Texas, but here working and advocating every day that they were here. I'm so pleased and honored to bring up Texas State Representative Trey Martinez Fisher.
Thank you, Cliff. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Declaration for American Democracy. It's great to be here again. And I will tell you, from the men and women of the Texas House Democratic Caucus, they send their regards. they send their well wishes, and they send their thanks because we have not given up in Texas. You have not given up here in Washington, D.C. We are continuing to work every single day, page by page, senator by senator, member by member to get this done. And let me tell you, to wake up this morning and see an announcement about a Freedom to Vote Act, it warms my heart in lots of ways, because if you know about voting laws in Texas, voting is not free in the state of Texas. So for instance, if you are a shift worker, you're a nurse, and you are working your hospital shift, and you can't vote because you are working your shift, tough luck. In this Freedom to Vote Act, it says that you have a no excuse absentee ballot. Shift workers can vote by mail. Absolutely. In Texas, despite the fact that our own governor, was tested positive for COVID, does not believe that you need to have a mask to go to a poll and vote. And so if you wanted to vote at home because of COVID, but you didn't qualify in Texas because you're not a senior citizen, the Freedom to Vote Act will allow you to do that. And that is a win for Texas. Voter ID. Everybody thinks that Democrats are against voter ID. They're not. We need ID requirements to live in the real world. The Freedom to Vote Act says you can vote with your driver's license, your college ID, your social security card, your Medicare card, your bank statement, your credit card statement, an ID requirement that lives in the real world. In Texas, you can get an election card and it's free, but if you live in West Texas, you will make a 200-mile round trip to the one and only location to get that card. Voting is not free in the state of Texas. The hurdles are high. There's so much tripwire. That's why we left for 5 weeks. I tell folks back home in San Antonio that I broke quorum for a month. My wife interrupts me and says 5 weeks. She makes it very clear that that 5th week meant something in the house, not being home, to be with my 12-year-old and 11-year-old daughter, to not be with my wife, to not visit my mother, to miss birthdays, to pick up and test positive for COVID myself. We are all making sacrifices to see this through, and I came back to celebrate this day with you, and we're going to take a small victory lap right now, a very, very small victory lap, and we're going to be appreciative for the work that's been done. But tomorrow morning, we're going to get up and we're going to work hard, and we're going to ask the next question. Leader Schumer, when are we going to have a cloture vote on freedom to vote? When are we going to have that vote? And we want to know right now, this is a now or never moment for our democracy. This is our attempt to be pragmatic. This is our attempt to meet people halfway. This is our attempt to be bipartisan. As they say in the old movie, Jerry Maguire, show me the money. Are we going to have 10 Republicans join us in a spirit of bipartisanship for the sake of our democracy and for the sake of our country? We shall see. And if that does not happen, then Cliff, Dana, all of the partners here, we're going to have to double down and work harder, because we are going to have to address, that elephant that's in the room. That we cannot let a tradition, a rule, a relic of the Senate infringe on my constitutional right to vote, on your constitutional right to vote, my mother's constitutional right to vote. The Constitution matters, and that should come first. Senate rules should come second. And we will have that conversation. But let's get the job done. Let's do it. Let's get it done before the election cycle. I can tell you in Texas, without a requirement to not partisan gerrymander, there are folks drawing the brand new congressional districts. Texas will receive 2 new seats in Congress. And we can let Governor Abbott draw those lines with partisan gerrymandering, or we can draw them with the spirit and the law of the Freedom to Vote Act that says that we are going to end partisan gerrymandering. Let's get folks into office because they are the true will of the people, not the will of the politicians. Let's get it done right, everybody. We're in this together. So good to be with you. We are not finished, and we will continue to fight every single day until we can put this on the president's desk and have a signing ceremony in the Oval Office. Thank you all very much.
All right, let's hear it for Representative Trey Martinez Fisher. He doesn't know this, but he's one of my personal heroes, having shepherded over 50 legislators from Texas to come to D.C. to risk arrest, to stand up and say, no, we are not going to accept taking away the vote from people in Texas. So a great fan of his. Now, let me next introduce our last speaker, who will be followed with final remarks from my co-moderator, Cliff. I'm so excited to introduce Susan Almeida. She is the Redistricting and Representation Counsel at Common Cause, Pennsylvania. She was previously the Executive Director of the League of Women Voters of Pennsylvania and now works tirelessly to combat gerrymandering and fight for fair redistricting across the country, which we know is happening right now. And we need to make sure we have fair districts drawn for everybody so everyone is enfranchised in this country. Suzanne, let me invite you up here now. Thank you so much.
It is so great to be here today with such incredible allies, such incredible activists showing up and using our collective voice to fight for a fairer, more equitable, and more just future for everyone in these United States. My name is Suzanne Almeida, and I'm the Redistricting and Representation Counsel at Common Cause. We are a national, nonpartisan organization with more than 1.5 million members, 30 state chapters, and since 1970, we have been passing pro-voter reforms at the national, state, and local level through lobbying, litigation, and grassroots organizing. I am here today because redistricting is happening as we speak in states across the country. And in too many of those states, it's business as usual. We've seen what happens when politicians choose their voters and not the other way around. We've seen what happens when our communities, particularly Black and brown communities who have historically been kept out of the process, are sliced and diced for political gain. We've seen what happens when districts are drawn to keep our Black and brown neighbors from being able to elect representatives of their choice. And we are already seeing history repeat itself in 2021 in states like Georgia, North Carolina, and Texas. This is why we have to pass the Freedom to Vote Act. When it passes, and I don't say if, because we will make this happen, states will have to adopt new and fair criteria. Partisan politicians will no longer have free rein to ignore communities and to craft districts purely for the benefit of their own partisan interests or their cronies. And we've seen the results. We've seen the militarized police forces. We've seen the climate change that has led to increased incidences of asthma and other disease. We've seen the defunding of our schools and the diverting of funds from where they are most needed in our communities to provide tax breaks for the big corporations. And reforming the way redistricting works will make a difference. The 2020 census data told us what we already know. Our United States are more diverse than ever before, and nearly all of our population growth is driven by Asian Pacific Islander and Latinx communities. But we also know that Black, Indigenous, Latinx, Asian American, Pacific Islander, and other communities of color have historically been sidelined in our democracy. They have been excluded from redistricting processes that prioritize partisan interests over representation. They have been targeted by voter suppression laws designed to make it more difficult for people to vote. And even the bodies of incarcerated people have been used to steal away power from cities by artificially increasing the population in white rural districts. We must do better. The Freedom to Vote Act is a giant leap forward toward a future where everyone, regardless of what they look like or where they live, has an equal shot at receiving the resources that their communities need to thrive. From shining a spotlight on the redistricting process by increasing transparency and requiring meaningful opportunities for public input, to laying out clear criteria for future maps, and most importantly, by prohibiting partisan gerrymandering, the Freedom to Vote Act will make a huge difference. And I want to finish with this. It is not too late for the Freedom to Vote Act to make a significant difference in this redistricting cycle. Yes, census data has been released. Yes, some states are drawing or have finished drawing maps, but we have not missed our chance to make an impact. The vast majority of states are still in the process of redistricting, and regardless of where they are in that process, states will be open to lawsuits if they try to circumvent the rules. We must act swiftly to pass robust national standards to ensure that we can safely and freely cast our ballots in districts where we can elect people who share our lived experience. President Biden and Congress must let nothing stand in their way of protecting our freedom to vote and ensuring fair elections, and that includes the filibuster. It is time to finish the job. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Suzanne. Thank you, Suzanne. Everybody say, finish the job. Finish the job. Say it again. Say, finish the job. Finish the job. So we're at the end of the rally, y'all. We are so thankful that all you were able to join us. We're so thankful for all the great speakers that we have. We're grateful to be here on a day where we're taking this next step in this battle to pass what we now know as the Freedom to Vote Act. And we know, just as all the speakers have said, we know at the end of the day that we are going to get this act passed. We know that we are going to get the freedom to vote and the voting rights that we deserve, the freedom rights that we need. We know that it's going to happen. And the way that we know it is because it's been through our actions that has even gotten us to this point. Because there were people who told us, y'all remember, there were people who told us months ago, this would never happen. There'll never be a For the People Act. There'll never be a John Lewis Voting Rights Act. So you got people even writing op-eds talking about why I will never vote for the For the People Act. But here we are today. Because of the activists, because we responded, because we went to West Virginia and marched in the streets, because organizations like DFAD and the Poor People's Campaign and Black Voters Matter and People for the American Way and this whole coalition, Common Cause, all these organizations have been in the streets, have been pushing, have been willing to even be to civil disobedience. We've gotten arrested along with members of Congress. It's been because of you all that we are even at the point we are at today, a point which some people told us we wouldn't even be close to. And so it's going to be because of us. It's going to be because of that same activity that gets us to the next level. Because what I know is that's what our history shows us. Our history shows us when everybody else tries to tell us that something is impossible, we come together and we make it possible. That's what we do as activists. And from my experience, my personal experience as a black organizer, as somebody who lived in Selma, Alabama, who lived with folks like C.C. Vivian and worked with folks like J.L. Chestnut and knew folks like Amelia Boynton, people who were on the bridge that day. From my perspective, we've shown us that when you stand in front of us 20 lines deep with state troopers, we still will not be moved. And that's the moment that we're in now. We've got to recognize that and stand in that faith that when we work, when we believe in our power, somebody say power. When we believe in our power, when we've got the faith of a grain of the mustard seed, when we have that belief, we can move mountains. And so we are going to move this mountain called the filibuster. We are going to move this mountain towards the freedom to vote. We are going to get our rights. We are going to get DC statehood. And we'll get, as Martin said earlier, we will get this country to be one step closer, just one step closer to what it's supposed to be. And I believe that more than ever, and I believe that because of you all. So I need all of you to say, we all got a role to play. And this is the last thing I'm gonna say, because we can't just be here and rally. Right? We got some work we got to do. So if you're not already in an organization, if you're not already in one of the DC statehood organizations, if you're not already a part of the DFAD coalition, go to DFAD's website, go to their social media, get signed up. If you want to be connected with Black Voters Matter, connect with us, connect with somebody. It doesn't have to be us. But we've got to be in this together if we're going to get to where we're trying to get to. So we've got to leave here today with some marching orders. We've got to leave here today ready to be a drum major for justice and ready to be a drum major for the voting rights and for the freedom to vote. We've got to leave here today ready to work. And I believe in you. It's nothing else. It's not about believing them in that building over there. I believe in us. And it's that belief that is going to get us where we need to get to. Thank you. Love you. Thank you all for coming today.